Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Megan.
And I'm Sierra. We are back with another book video, and this video is going to be our January and February reading wrap-up.
And we've read quite a few books.
We have. So, I think we have probably like 30 plus books.
We need to keep it
together.
quick.
So, we have a mix of physical and non-physical books we've read on Kindle Unlimited. So,
You could also follow us on Goodreads if you want to keep up to date with the books we're reading and what we're rating them. I don't fully know how you find us, but
wherever you can like search people, just search our names and you should be able to follow us from there.
Just follow us though, because like I'm not gonna friend people I don't know. That's just like my rule that I have for Goodreads.
Before we get into the actual books, we want to run through our personal 5-star rating system because everyone rates books just a little bit differently, and so we want to give you guys some insight into how we rate these books and what that means. So with 1 star, we honestly have never rated a book 1 star.
I honestly I would not finish a book that if I was gonna give it a 1-star rating, and therefore like I also don't rate books I didn't finish reading. I know some people like if they DNF it they'll give it a 1 star, but
I truly also like to this point I don't think I've read like a 1-star book.
Yeah.
So that's what that would be.
Well, except I guess I have DNF'd a book, and so maybe that would be a 1 star.
True. Okay, 2 stars for us is we finished the book and we actively disliked it, did not hated it.
I don't even feel like I've given it 2 star.
I don't know if I have either. There's some books that looking back I feel like I could give 2 stars, but nothing that I'll be talking about in this video.
3 stars is a very average, and overall you'd be like, I enjoyed the book, but would I read it again? Maybe not. Would I recommend it to everyone that asks about it? Probably not.
Yeah. For me, 3 stars is very much, I read it, I wouldn't recommend it. Not in the sense of oh, don't read this, but I would not recommend it out to people.
Because it didn't intrigue you enough.
Yeah. 4 stars, which is lucky for you guys, the vast majority of our books. 4 stars to me, honestly, I feel like I am guilty of rating books that are anywhere from 3.5 to 4.5 stars. I gave them 4 stars usually. I'm trying to be better about just lowering my 3.5s to 3s. But usually that's any book that I liked or even potentially loved. Some books that get up to 4.5 for me, I could still love. But those are books that I read, I would recommend anyone read them.
And then 5 stars, I think both of us would agree, a 5 star is a feeling. And you're reading the book and you're actively questioning is this going to be a 5-star book for me?
For me, it's not even questioning. I'm I can't wait to finish this book and give it 5 stars. I have to have that feeling, and then it can get 5 stars.
Yeah. And what's weird is I could literally love a book so much, but not get that feeling, and then I'm well, then I can't give it 5 stars, even if I have really no critiques on the book.
Yeah. So that's our personal 5-star rating system. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with our wrap-up. So the first book that I read this year was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi book. The main character's name is Jason Dessen, and he essentially is living this life as a college professor. He used to be this really big hotshot scientist, but kind of gave that up to pursue just average family life. He's married, he has a teenage son, but he always kind of wondered what his life would have been like if he'd pursued that really elaborate scientific career that he thought about doing. And then he's kidnapped by this complete stranger. He doesn't know who this person is. They have a mask. They're trying to hide their identity. And then he gets knocked out, and then he wakes up and he realizes that he's in this scientific laboratory, and they're oh my god, you did it. And he's what are you talking about? And so he's in this new life where apparently he's this hotshot scientist, and he was never married to his wife, never had a teenage son, and he's supposedly in the life that he always thought he wanted. But he's well, I want to go back to that life. There's lots of twists and turns as he tries to figure out if he can even get back to that life, if that life is real.
An interstellar vibe to it in terms of just different dimensions and stuff like that.
And it's just him trying to see if he can find his family, or if they're even real. Who knows? But it was good. I give this book 4 stars when I read it.
The very first book that I read this year was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I ended up giving this book a 3 star. For me, it was a book that there's so many characters going on, and there's a lot of different time loops going on because this character is living the same day over and over as different characters in the book. And so in that sense, it kind of gets a little bit confusing, and your brain power needs to be turned on to read this. So I think you definitely could enjoy this book more than I did if you're able to follow all of that stuff.
The next book that I read was Darling Girl by Liz Mikulski. This one I gave 3 stars. Honestly, looking back, I could potentially bump it down to 2 stars because I kind of look back and I'm ew, I didn't like that book. It's supposed to be not necessarily a retelling of Peter Pan, but kind of an alternate telling of the true story of Peter Pan. The main character's name is Holly. She's supposed to be Wendy's granddaughter, and I don't even want to tell you how Peter Pan's involved because it's just kind of ew, but I don't know. If you guys have read this, I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it. Didn't really love this one, so Yeah.
The second book that I read this year was The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is a pretty popular book because it's in Reese Witherspoon's book club. I ended up rating it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't bad. I just wasn't like necessarily reaching for the book every single night, looking forward to finding out what was going on. Essentially, the different chapters are told in different characters' perspectives, and it's happening at this wedding that's on like its own island, and there's some stuff that's happening that's weird, and people are dying, and you're trying to figure out
like one person
dies. But there's other like weird stuff going on. You start figuring out the characters are all weirdly involved in a way that you wouldn't necessarily see coming, and it wasn't bad. I just didn't love it.
The next book that I read was The Martian by Andy Weir. Megan also read this one this year. So this, honestly, if you've seen the movie, like, I saw the movie before I read the book. So,
and like, well, they're not the exact same. They're pretty dang similar.
Yeah, so if you've seen the movie, like, you know what happens in the book. But essentially, if you don't know the plot of either, the main character, I don't remember his name. Mark Watney. He gets left behind after his team has to leave.
There's like
their
a sandstorm
Mars
on
mission.
Mars, and so they have to abort their mission. They're trying to get to like their little escape shuttle, and then Mark Watney gets taken out by something that flies and hits him. So they all think he dies, and they all leave Mars, and then he ends up surviving. So then he's left alone on Mars. They're not planning on having any other mission on Mars for like another 4 years.
So it's about him trying to survive, seeing how he can A, find contact with NASA, B, just try and make his food sources last. Can he grow anything to make his own food, and just having to kind of problem solve all of the specifics and logistics of surviving on Mars.
So it's just fun if you like have any interest in like science or space travel stuff. It's just fun how the author includes all of that in the book.
Yeah, I gave this one 4 stars.
I did as well. Alright, next I read a book on Kindle Unlimited. I read Hopeless by Colleen Hoover, and this was a book for some reason, like as someone who's read a ton of her books, it wasn't one that necessarily like jumped out at me to like reach for because I hate the cover of it. And so that's why I read it on Kindle Unlimited.
One thing about me is I do judge a book by its cover.
But I was actually pleasantly surprised. I actually gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. So the main character is in high school, and she was originally homeschooled, but now she has been allowed to go to high school for her senior year. And so she's at a grocery store one day, and this guy like recognizes her, and then like comes up to her by her car in the parking lot, and is like acting like he knows her, and she's like, I don't know who you are, and he's like asking her what her name is, and she's like Sky, and then he's like, oh. They're in class together, so like their paths are still crossing. They end up building a relationship, and you find out a twist later, and kind of like discovering this girl's like whole entire past, and that's what most of the book is about.
So the next book I read was Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour. I give this one 3 stars, I think, and it follows 2 characters, Sarah and Emily, and it kind of switches POVs between each of their points of view. And it's supposed to be romance, but quite honestly, the reason it fell a little bit flat for me was because these 2 characters don't really meet and get together until towards the end of the book. The beginning is mostly just focusing on their individual storylines, and quite honestly, I cared a lot more about Emily's storyline than Sarah's. And I feel like if this book had taken a different route and not tried to be a romance, if it was just a fictional book following Emily's timeline and story specifically, it would have been a lot better. So kind of felt a little bit flat, and I landed on 3 stars.
The next book that I read was By a Thread by Lucy Score, and so I read that on Kindle Unlimited. I had already read Things We Never Got Over by her, and I really liked that book, so I decided to do this one because it was also recommended by Sarah Caroli, and I was like, okay, I'm interested. And it's basically an office dating trope is like the main thing that it has going on, so there's really not much more to it besides that. But I liked it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I did like Things We Never Got Over more, but that was just my personal preference, and honestly both of them were rated 4 stars. So
the next book that I read was Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. It follows Bea and Levi, who are like grad school rivals or like nemesis, but mostly like that's in Bea's head because she just thinks that Levi never liked her. They are put on the same project to work on like a NASA helmet thing with like brain stimulation stuff, and have to work together on the project while like navigating their complicated relationship.
Which isn't that complicated.
But eventually, obviously, it's a romance book, so like, you know, they might end up together, might not. If you read Love Hypothesis, this is very much the same vibes, and I gave this one 4 stars. Just like a light, easy, fun read.
The next book that I read was Room by Emma Donoghue, and this book we've literally had since like 8th grade, I swear. Have been holding on to it forever, and finally I read it because of our TBR video. And honestly, I gave it 3 stars. I really did not like this book. Maybe I could give it 2 stars. It's told from the perspective of 5-year-old Jack, whose mom had been kidnapped when she was in college. I think it's like 5 years later or something. And so all he ever has known is this room that they're in and their life that she has kind of like made normal to him. And, you know, it's an interesting story, but like also they're stuck in a room. Like it's really not that interesting. And I know it's narrated by a 5-year-old supposedly, but just like I didn't love that and it kind of bothered me. It just was weird, I thought.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, the next book that I read was the third installment of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, Life, the Universe, and Everything. I'm not even going to try to explain the premise of this third book because I don't even like know what happened. This was by far the most confusing of all of the books that I've read, and they're written in a way where it's supposed to be kind of like a zany like style and things don't really make sense anyways, but this third book I was lost. I gave it 3 stars. I could probably give it 2 stars just for like sheer confusion, but I don't know. It fell way more flat than the first 2 books. I at least like could comprehend what's going on in the first 2. This third one I was like, I don't know what's happening. I was trying to read words so I can finish the book. So for me, I don't know. I still have 2 more books, which I probably will still finish because I bought this whole thing, but the third one was not it for me.
Next I read Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a romance book that takes place between the son of the President of the United States and the Prince of England. So Alex is the son of the President and Henry is the prince.
Like, what are their names?
I just looked at them. I thought that as far as romance goes, like this was pretty typical in terms of like what I'm looking for in most romance books that I'm reading. Obviously, like they're not supposed to be in a relationship because of the political component, but also since they're gay, that's like another tension
and
thing.
neither of them
like,
are out
is that
in the story.
Right. And so I thought it was a fun, enjoyable read, and I enjoyed seeing the characters' relationship build. So I gave it 4 stars.
The next book that I read was on Kindle Unlimited, and it was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. It was just like a typical mystery type of thriller vibe. These 2 main characters, which I don't remember their names at this point because I didn't look it up ahead of time, but they are married and they go like on this vacation to this cabin in the woods. It's also winter, so eventually they get stuck there. It goes back and forth between them in that current time and then also like flashbacks from his wife of like their previous anniversaries and stuff of like years past and like little notes that she's written because she's like, oh, like I want to like write you these notes like on our anniversary to have these memories to look back on. And there's also like another person who invited them to the cabin, but like they don't know who that was because they were invited like anonymously. And the twist at the end like blew my mind. Like I was like, oh, I need to reread the whole book now because I was just like mind blown. So I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend it if you are looking for a good mystery or thriller.
All right, my next read was The Match by Sarah Adams, and I've read probably 2 or 3 of her books at this point, and they're honestly like one of my favorite, like just easy romance reads. Like the characters are pretty like not annoying, but it's not like super deep stakes. Like it's just like nice and simple. And I picked this because I was like on a plane and I just wanted like a nice quick book. And so it's basically about the main character. She has dealt with seizures and she also has a guide dog now, or like a service dog, to assist with her when she has seizures. She now works with the company that does the training for different service dogs. She meets the love interest because his daughter has just started having seizures, and so the daughter like reaches out to this girl's email posing as the dad to like get a dog because she wants a dog, but the dad's like not really interested in that. And so when they first meet, the meeting doesn't go super well because like he's like, the dad's just like not interested, so he like really doesn't even want to like talk to her. And then eventually he's kind of convinced, and he just feels like his daughter has been like down and like not really the same person since she's not been as independent. And so with them having to, you know, have forced proximity with like training the dog and whatever, then a relationship ensues. So I give it 4 stars.
Next, I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I feel like I'm late to the game on this one. I gave this one 4 stars. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I thought it was going to follow mainly just Daisy Jones. Like I thought it was going to be essentially like Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo Part 2 because that's very like female main character oriented, which would have been fine, but I was like, I don't know if I'm like looking for that right now. But it actually follows both Daisy Jones and mainly the main lead singer of the band The Six, and his name is Billy. And this book's also told in interview style, which I actually thought made it more fast-paced because there's not like the fluff and all that stuff that you sometimes get with books. It's very just like character-driven and stuff. So I enjoyed this a lot. I thought there was a lot of nuance to the relationships between the characters, and I just thought it was a fun read. So I'm looking forward to watching the show. on Prime Video, but I'm waiting for Megan to finish reading this.
Up next, I read The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren.
I also read The Soulmate Equation this year,
This one was a 4.5 out of 5 stars for me because, like, I was so close to, like, having that 5-star feeling, but I felt like I was looking for, like, a little bit more at the end, which then solidified for me to, like, not give it a 5 stars.
I gave it 4 stars.
But essentially, the main guy in this book has founded a, like, genetic matchmaking app, and so he's, like, a frequent visitor at a coffee shop that the main female character's at. I don't remember her name. Jessica. And so, like, they have her and her friend, like, always at this coffee shop.
He's, like, this nudie, like
they call him Americana because that's what he orders, and, like, he's just, like, has, like, a presence, ambiance to him that,
like, why is he always so grumpy and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, that's just the vibe he gives
off.
And
so, eventually one of the baristas tells them that he's, like, working on this dating app, and they're like, that's crazy because he just so does not seem like a type. And so one of the days that he stops by there, they, like, start up a conversation with them. And the best friend of of Jessica is also a romance writer, so I think she kind of, like, intervenes. It's, like, super interested.
She's like, let us go and, like, be, like, participants in your dating app thing.
And so, because it still is, like, trial run stuff, and so he invites them to go down to, like, their headquarters and, like, give their DNA to, like, start being a part of the matchmaking service.
Come to find out that they're 98%,
like, the highest ever for who they've tested. The guy's kind of like, I believe in the app and I believe what,
you know, the science that I've done.
The science, and so he's kind of, like, willing to give it a go, and then she's kind of, like, a little not sure, but she's also, like, they offer to pay her money to,
she's
like,
trying
commit
to time her daughter and stuff
to go to the dates because she's just like, I really don't think I'm, like, trying to enter a relationship. So they're pushing so hard because they want the PR for it, and so she eventually accepts because then she doesn't have to, like, get another job and she gets money, but she's also like, interested in figuring out if they would work as a match. So that's this.
The next book that I read was on Kindle Unlimited, and it was If He Had Been With Me. I don't remember the author's name off the top of my head right now. This one is a YA romance, and it follows the main character and her neighbor, who's, like, a family best friend because their two moms were best friends, and, like, when they had their kids, like, they grew up being friends, but then when they get to high school, they kind of, like, part ways and form their own friend groups. And so it shows basically, like, the girl main character, she's dating this boy, like, all throughout high school, and then her boyfriend across the street, like, not boyfriend, but, you know, the boy main character, I guess, he has a girlfriend. Like, it just shows them, like, through high school and kind of, like, them being friends, but then, like, not being friends because they're in different groups. And there's a very sad part that, like, when you read the first page, you, like, know what happens, but then you, like, wait for it to happen in the end, and then it's sad. But I give this one 4 stars. It was just, like, just good enough. I feel like YA doesn't, like, hit, you know, too hard for me. I don't know. And I feel like the end was rushed. The end, like, the end. I was like, oh my god, what is going on? Like, that just, like, went from 0 to 100. I feel like we didn't need that. But, yeah.
Okay, next I read/listened to this book on Audible, and it's Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. And I had seen this book talked about just about everywhere, and a lot of people really spoke highly of it. And it has, like, a good rating on Goodreads. Essentially, it's like a hockey romance. I feel like you don't need any more explanation than that. But to me, I gave this 3 stars. Arguably, I could have maybe gone lower. I thought it was very Wattpad-y, and, like, I just thought there was almost, like, nothing to the relationship that the main characters had. They just kind of, like, fell in love, and the guy was, like, way more interested in the girl than I feel like the girl was, and then all of a sudden she just was, like, she just folded for no reason, and then
she's like, actually, I
just was kind of like, what is the point of the book? I don't know. It was fine, but I didn't love it.
The next book that I read was The Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. This is actually very different, I feel like, than books that I normally read. I just kind of picked it up a few months ago at Barnes & Noble on a whim, and it follows Cooper and his daughter, Finch. They are living alone in the woods, and they have been for Finch's entire life, and pretty much have no contact with the outside world except for one neighbor who knows, like, where they are, and then they have one person who will come in once a year to deliver supplies in them so they don't have to leave their cabin. And one year their supplier doesn't show up, and he's always said, if I don't show up, like, I'm not showing up, like, something happened to me. And so then Cooper has to make the decision, okay, if we need supplies, I have to, like, go out into the public. He brings his daughter with him, and then just, like, as the story goes on, more and more people kind of get involved with their life, and he's kind of like, this is not good. And so you're trying to figure out what it is that happened that made it so that they have to be hiding in the woods this whole time. It was good. I give this one 4 stars.
Next book I read was Today, Tonight, and Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. Essentially, this book kind of, like, reminds me of a couple different books, In some ways, it reminds me of like the Summer of Broken Rules because they had Assassin in that game. And in this game, they have like, it's the last day of high school. The two main characters are graduating, they're seniors. And they've always had like this rivalry going on because like academically, they've both just been like head to head. They've been fighting for valedictorian. At the like last day of school, they also have, I don't know if it's called Assassin in this book, but it's essentially like there's a scavenger hunt going on where like you need to send pictures to find the stuff, and then you also have like someone you're responsible for like killing out of the game until there's one winner. And so eventually they end up teaming up to try and help each other out. Yeah, that's it. That's kind of it. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars because I liked it.
The next book that I read was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I feel like this one has been pretty popular this year. I was intrigued because of the cover. I just think it's really pretty. This one I've classified mostly as just fiction, which is kind of a new genre for me because fiction's hard for me to like really get into because I'm like, I don't know what's happening, like what is going to go on. So I will admit that the start is a little bit slow. Not that it's not interesting because it is, but you're like what is happening? It's very good. I enjoyed it. I'm not someone who annotates books or cares too much about quotes and stuff, but this book I feel like just had so many quotes and stuff that I would pause and be like, if I did annotate, I would like underline that or something. And then also, for those of you who have read it or for those of you who haven't, this book has different parts, and when you get to the NPC part, that one will just break your heart. So yeah, good book. I gave this one 4 stars. Really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it.
Alright, next I read a Kindle Unlimited book, and it's called Mine Would Be You by K. Jamila. Maybe that's how you say her name. And I had like, this book didn't have a whole lot of ratings on Goodreads, and from what they were like pretty good, but I was like, I don't know. Sometimes there's 2,000 ratings, and you're like, what does that mean? So I was going into it pretty blind. I gave it 5 stars, which I haven't given it 5 stars in a while. It's a romance book. Essentially, the main character meets the guy when she's out at a bar, and he just, like, they hit it off there, and then she ends up spending the night at his place, but nothing happens, and then she leaves the next day, doesn't get his information or anything, and so she's like, oh shoot, like, whoops, I am not gonna see this guy again. And so then, kind of like skips forward a couple months, she gets an invite, her and her friends, who are her roommates, get an invite to her ex's wedding, because he's getting married, and they were like all childhood friends growing up.
He's
but,
the
like
best man. Is he the best man?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty predictable. Even I knew that when I was reading it. But he ends up being the best man at the wedding, so it's like perfect opportunity then for, you know, them to reconvene. And I mean, there is like some drama here and there, but what I really liked about this book was it was just like a lot of good communication. The characters are both like, they know what they want and they're interested, and they realize like a good thing when they have it. And so that was just kind of like refreshing to see, and I feel like that's why I gave it 5 stars. So
the next book that I read is Billy Summers by Stephen King. This one is my highest rated book thus far. I gave it 4.5 stars when I read it. It essentially follows Billy Summers, who is a hitman who only kills bad people, and he decides that this is going to be his last job. It's supposed to have a really high payout, and then he's just done for good. He wants to like go to an island and just like chill and settle down. So the first like little bit of the book covers him like living his fake life in this small town where he's going to like get ready to commit the hit. He has to build this fake life around while he's in town. He's pretending to be an author, and you actually get like little snippets of him writing his book because, well, he's like, well, while I'm here, if I have to sit in an office building for like 4 or 5 hours a day to like make my story seem legit, like I'll actually write something down. So he starts writing his actual like life story, which gives you some insight into how he grew up and like why he is the way he is, what he's doing, and then after he commits the crime, he has to like go on the run essentially, and go on the run from a lot more people than you would initially think. And so that's what like the second half of the book covers, is just him being on the run, and the ending is very sad. It made me very sad. So that's all I would say about that, but I really liked it. Honestly, I think if you read 11/22/63 and you like that, this is similar vibes.
Next, I have another Kindle Unlimited, which is The Right Move. This was actually the second book in a duology, but like they're on different characters, so like you don't really have to read them in order. And I picked this one just because I thought it sounded a little more interesting and the reviews were a little bit higher. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Essentially, the main guy character is a player in the NBA, and then the main female character is a flight attendant who was friends with the main character in the first book because they worked as like the hockey team's flight attendants. Main girl character, she ends up needing a place to stay because she has no one else to stay with because she had just broken up with her like boyfriend of 6 years that she thought she was going to marry. Her friend calls in a favor for her brother to be like, can you please let her stay with you and be your roommate? Like you travel all the time for games anyways, like, and she's traveling with the hockey team, you'll hardly see each other, and it's a forced proximity. And so they kind of realize maybe there's more. Actually, there's fake dating in this book too, because at one of the practices, she shows up because she doesn't have a key to get in, so she's like looking for him. And then the owner or the manager of the basketball team calls the guy over to like chat with him, and he is talking about how the old captain, like him and his wife, like were friends with the manager and his wife, and how like so it kind of emphasized how important relationships were to like the manager, and he's trying to make himself look good. So he's like, actually, I have a girlfriend, and it's serious. And so then she's there, and he's like, you can meet her right now. So it's like got the forced fake dating thing going on, and then the rest is history.
And then I read The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. This is a YA romance. I gave it 4 stars. It essentially is kind of like a Groundhog's Day type of book where the main character, Emily, is living Valentine's Day over and over again, and she can't figure out why. She's just trying to have the perfect Valentine's Day with her boyfriend, but like no matter what happens, she just keeps waking up. And then she also keeps hitting this guy's car. This guy's Nick, and she's like, she tries a million different ways to like make sure she doesn't hit his car, but she like usually does. And as the days are going on, she's getting to know Nick a little bit more, and she's realizing she's not as interested in her boyfriend as she thought she was, and she might be more interested in Nick. Eventually, one of these Groundhog Days, she spends like the entire day with Nick and figures there might be something there. And yeah,
and she always like, she realizes that she like literally can't make the day start over, so she kind of goes into like the day that covers most of this book with like,
she's like, I'm gonna do whatever I want.
Whatever. It's gonna reset the next day. Next, I had yet another Kindle Unlimited book. So this was Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. This was the second book in the Knock 'Em Out series because it had just been released. So it follows Nash, and then the main female character, she had been briefly mentioned in the first book, but like not really enough like where you pay attention to her. So it kind of surprised me that she was the main character in this book. But she comes back into town. There's like a bunch, like there's crime stuff going on in this too, which usually like I don't like, but I think it's done well in these books. And so she's in town, like she's making it seem like she's just in town like randomly, but she's kind of there related to the crime stuff going on. And so Nash, being like the like head police chief, is like, once he figures that out, he's like, first of all, they kind of had a thing going on, so he was like, was that just like you trying to use me because you're trying to figure stuff out for your case? But then she is kind of like, they just like don't really trust each other at first, and then but they still realize they have like strong feelings for each other, and they're also trying to figure out all the crime stuff that happened in the first book is taking place in this book too. It was good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars.
Okay, the next book I read was on Kindle Unlimited. It is The Housemaid, and this one I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed the premise. Honestly, it starts off with the main character, who I don't know like any of the names of these main characters on my Kindle Unlimited books, but she is hired as a housemaid for this small family. It's a husband and a wife, and they have a young daughter. And initially the wife/mom seems really like she needs the help, she wants the help, and this main character just got out of prison, so she's like not having much luck finding any other work. And so she's like, if I could get this job, like it would be a dream come true, because it's gonna be a live-in position, she's living in her car, like she needs this job. And so she gets hired, and then the wife/mom does like a 180 flip. She makes the house a mess every single day, making it hard for her to clean up. She like blames the new housemaid on like, I'm missing these papers, and like you must have thrown them away. Just like complete flip, and like making her life super hard. And then the husband, meanwhile, is kind of like sticking up for the housemaid, and she like starts to gather feelings for the husband, but she's like, I can't because he's my employer, and like they're married. And so this is all going on, and so there's a big twist at the end. I feel like I need to like just leave it at that, but that is what I'll leave you with.
Next, I read this absolute brick of a book.
It's mammoth.
So this is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. To be fair, I listened to the first half via audiobook, and then I read the second half because I ran out of my audiobook free trial. And I will say, while this is a daunting book, I do think it is probably best experienced read, because then I feel like you're just like understanding more of what's going on. Essentially what happens is the main character, Jake Epping, he is from 2011, and then he's a school teacher, and he gets pulled in by this guy who owns a diner, who has like basically a portal to 1959. The diner guy is like, I want you to go stop the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And it goes back to 1959 only. Every time you like go back and forth between the two, it resets the same day. And so he's like, I was like, you know, so far in, but then eventually like I had to leave and come back. And so eventually Jake decides that he is going to go ahead and go for it. And so it's basically following his whole journey. There's like other stuff
because like it's years of his life that you have to like get through before you even get to the assassination day.
Yeah, and so like there's other things going on that he's kind of like, well, maybe if I'm going back I could like change this thing too. And so there's a couple different plot points going on. He's traveling to different places for different reasons. He's building relationships with people. He's getting a job because, again, he's here for years. And so there is like a romance subplot that I feel like is like significant enough to mention. It's probably like not more until like the second half of the book. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars.
I love that book. I gave it 5 stars when I read it, but I read it last year, so. Next, I read The Moment I Met You by Debbie Johnson. This one is a romance book kind of split into what happened 10 years ago and then kind of present time. So the main character is Elena Godwin, and her boyfriend Harry travel to Mexico. She kind of feels like this is the last leg of their relationship. She's like, I'm probably gonna break up with him after this trip. Like, I just don't see a future with him. And then they end up split up at some point during their vacation. Like, he's gone off to go do something and she's looking at this church. And then an earthquake happens and Elena ends up trapped underground with another guy who's on the same tour as them. His name is Alex. And they just really like bond while they're trapped underground, as you probably would if you're in that situation, and continue getting to know each other as they both like heal in the hospital and stuff. And so
her boyfriend, sorry, I read this too, not this year.
Her boyfriend ends up in a coma, and so has like a lot of potential health struggles coming up. And so Elena's conflicted with what she feels like she should do and what she wants to do. It's been 10 years since the accident, and they're going to make a documentary kind of like a Where Are They Now with all of the victims and survivors. And so when she's working with this documentary person about trying to talk about everything that happened, it brings up a lot of feelings and emotions for her and just makes her kind of second guess everything that she chose to do. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I did like it, but I felt like there was a lot of nuance that I wanted to be explored in this book, and then the author kind of gave the main character an easy way out, I thought.
Okay, the last book that I have for this video is The Lost Ticket by Freya Sampson. I don't know if this is technically just like fiction or if it's supposed to be romance. I would say it's more of just a fiction book with a lot of like, it's honestly a book that just explores relationships in general. There is a romance subplot between the main female character, but essentially her story is that she had been in a long-term relationship with someone she thought she was going to marry. They end up breaking it off with her, and so she moves to London because that's where her sister's at. Like, she was at a different city, like a couple hours away. And she goes to London to stay with her sister because now she can't stay at her apartment that she was in. She is out riding the bus one day and then meets this older gentleman who's riding on the bus, and they get to talking, and he's saying how he has been riding Route 88 for like 60 years to try and like find this woman that he met 60 years ago on the bus, and they're supposed to go on a date, but then he lost her number and they never crossed paths again. And so she's like, you know what, that is a very cute story. I'm going to help you try and find the girl you're looking for. I guess the last thing I would say is just like, there's a lot of different relationships going on. Like, it explores her past relationship and how to manage that. It explores like the family dynamic because like her mom and sister and her have like an interesting relationship, and it's exploring her relationship that she has with like the old man that she meets and the caregiver. And yeah, I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was a little slow to get into it, but like once it picks up, it's pretty good. And it wasn't like that horribly long.
The last book that I read in February was Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. And this essentially follows the main character, whose name I already forgot, Mallory Quinn. She is a former drug addict. She's still young, so like she's in her 20s, but she's looking to get back on her feet. And so she takes this nannying position for this husband and wife who have a 5-year-old son. His name is Teddy. And while she's watching him over the summer, Teddy has this imaginary friend, Anya, who he's like, oh, like, you know, this is Anya, and he draws these pictures, and Anya looks like very scary, so Mallory gets concerned. But his parents assure Mallory that there's nothing going on, it's just an imaginary friend. And she also learns about a murder that took place, supposedly, in their area many years ago. And so she's trying to like uncover connections between this murder that potentially took place and then also Teddy's friend Anya, and she thinks Teddy's being like possessed with all the pictures that he's forced to draw. And then it shows the pictures even in the book too, so you can see they're pictures that a 5-year-old could not have drawn. And so she works together with also like this gardener who's around her age to try and uncover the mystery of what's going on. if there's a ghost that's possessing this little boy. And yeah, I will say the ending was a twist that I did not see coming. So I enjoyed it. I give it 4 stars. Those are all the books we've read. We have books scattered all over our floor now. Well, I do. Megan stacked her books up nicely. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let us know if you have read any of these books that we talked about, and if you did, what were your opinions or ratings down below?
And were they different from ours? Like, did we love a book that you hated?
Or did we hate a book that you loved?
Yeah.
We want to know.
Otherwise, I think that kind of does it for this video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel down below. We have a podcast you guys can go listen to. It's called According To.
And also, if you have any other book videos that you want to see from us in the future, let us know because we enjoy making them.
Otherwise, we'll see you guys in our next video.
Bye!